Anyway, we should start the show while I'm not coughing, which is a very brief window of time.
Fair enough.
Too late.
There it is. There it is. Comedy, ladies and gentlemen, it's all about timing. All about timing.
God.
Oh, man. All right, so while Marco is dying, let's cover the most important piece of follow-up right up top. Is it Yanny or Laurel? Go ahead, John.
I don't like that one as much as the dress, because although I had a thought about both the dress and that Yanny Laurel thing, they both kind of the sound one much more than the visual one, but they both highlight the fact that even though we're all reading the same internet, the output devices we're all using vary so incredibly widely. The visual ones less than the auditory ones, but both vary a lot. Like we all think like, I looked at this picture and I think X, and I looked at the picture and I think Y, like with the dress thing, right? But we're not all looking at the same picture. This is setting aside for a moment the input device, like ourselves, like the people vary from person to person, which is also more true of the auditory one than the visual one, I think, just due to people getting old and their hearing going bad, versus color, sensing colors, which probably changes with age, but maybe not as much. But anyway, setting aside the person, the device that we're looking at, monitors have different gamma. You're looking at a different lighting conditions, so on and so forth. But speakers, especially in the smartphone age, vary incredibly widely. So for something like the Yanny Laurel thing, where it changes based on how much, where the frequency cutoff is, right? Get rid of all the bass, it sounds like one thing. Get rid of all the high frequencies, it sounds like the other. I think that makes that one more boring to me, but it shows like the reason people are so convinced is because they think we're all listening to the same sound, and we're not. The sound you get out of your tinny, crappy phone speakers is very different than the sound you get out of your, desktop speakers or your laptop speakers or whatever. And then, of course, the input device, if you have cold or you have trouble hearing certain frequencies or whatever. So anyway, I think it's dumb. I think the dress one was also dumb, but slightly less dumb because you could look at the same picture and convince yourself one way or the other. But the audio one, if the frequencies are not getting through to your ear, there's not much you can do to convince yourself it sounds like the other one. Whereas the same picture you could go back and forth on. If you change the frequency cutoff so it's kind of in the middle, you can hear both of them, but that's like altering the sound.
I have heard all of the different variations of hearing both of them, I've heard many of the variations, and I can only hear one. But John, you haven't answered the question.
Go to the New York Times one. Like if you do a hard frequency cutoff of all the low or all the high, it's impossible to hear the other one at the extremes.
So what did you?
That's why it's kind of.
What did you hear?
So anyway, it also shows how crappy people's speakers are, because I have no speakers that I own that can make me hear the one with all the low frequencies cut off. I guess all of my speakers, including my crappy earpods and all of my iOS devices, have enough bass in them that I can't get it to sound like the one with just high frequencies.
Well, part of that's also that all your speakers are ancient, and so basically
like your ears.
Yeah, like new speakers from a lot of different people, especially speakers in smartphones, as you mentioned. They do a lot of processing to try to make up for the inherent crappiness of a speaker that's that small and or cheap. Like if you actually profile, if you play a test sound out of the iPhone speaker and profile it with some kind of measurement thing, like it's shocking like how flat of a response curve it doesn't have. Like they do a heck of a lot of processing with almost all modern, phone speakers and anything with anything like, like the home voice assistant cylinders and everything. There's so much processing to try to make up for physics and economics that, you want a very small device, but you want it to sound great. Whereas older speakers, they didn't have the electronic resources to do that kind of processing. So they just rely on like physics and quality and size. And so, old speakers, like you will never have like the kind of processing unless something's really going wrong, maybe with the crossover or something, but you would never have the kind of processing that would heavily alter that sound to sound that different to people. That being said, people's hearing is also very different, as you mentioned, like, and it changes throughout your life as well. We all know that that young people can hear higher frequencies than older people, but also like your hearing does not have a flat frequency response curve either. Like you have peaks and valleys in like certain frequencies you hear more strongly than others or have more distortion than others, and that's just the realities of us being these big bags of analog meat.
Wait, but John, you never actually answered the question, did you?
It's pronounced Syracuse.
In it, like I said, in its normal form, being like unmodified, like, not using one of those tools that actually cuts off frequencies in the source sound, but just playing it through all my speakers, playing it through my AirPods, playing it through my phone speaker, my iPad speakers, my laptop speakers. It's Laurel for me all the time. And I have to really cut off a lot of the low frequencies before it switches to Yanny, like at the source, not in, So I don't have any speakers that have so little bass, or to Marco's point, I don't have any speakers that do not massively process the sound to make sure that there is some bass to ever hear the Yanny one. And I am old, so obviously the high frequencies are probably much less audible to me than they are to younger people. So maybe my speakers are playing them, and I just can't hear them.
Marco?
I know what you're talking about, but only just barely, and I didn't listen.
All right. Well, at this very moment, you can drop in a clip for the listeners to hear exactly what I'm talking about.
Laurel.
But basically, it's like the blue and gold dress, where you can either hear one thing or hear another, although obviously the dress was seeing one thing or seeing another.
But like, it would be like the dress one, but they'd say, oh, but if you can't see the other color, apply this filter that turns everything blue. Don't you see it blue now? It's like, yeah, of course I see it blue now, because you changed the source, right? So the ones, like, if you can't hear it the other way, cut off all the low frequencies. Oh, great. Well, you're right. Now it sounds different. Good job. You changed the source.
All right, hold on. Let me listen to it. One sec.
Go to, the New York Times one is the best because it has a slider for frequency cutoff. So if you leave it in the middle...
All right, one sec. I'll listen to it, but I won't be able to hear you. One sec.
Laurel.
Okay, it's clearly Laurel. It's not even close.
Right, but that's just the speaker. So go to the ones that have the cutoff. And the worst part is...
All right.
Hold on, wait. I need to do this too, so I'm going to...
Hold on.
Laurel. Yanny.
Oh, I can sort of hear Yanny, when I crank it all the way over.
Yeah, so listening in my regular headphones through my decent setup, not even my good headphones, just my regular headphones, I can only hear Yanny on the New York Times one in the rightmost two notches, like the far right and the one right before it. And the one right before it is really kind of a crossover point anyway, so you really got to go pretty far right.
Yeah, and I think the middle is the, like, unmodified. I forget what the unmodified is.
Yeah, the middle is, like, not frequency modified.
Hold on, let's bring it back to the show. So we left the show on you going to listen to it, as far as I'm concerned.
You don't know when we left the show. Well, Marco decides when we leave the show.
Yeah, oh my God, just work with me here.
It's power.
Right, so
there's no question it's Laurel. If you're not hearing Laurel, you have seriously messed up speakers or ears, and that's fine. I'm not going to judge your speakers or ears, but just so you know, they're not normal.
Although I have something to add to what you hear. The thing that really makes this sound also not great is when you hear Laurel, it sounds like someone saying someone's name, or, because that's what it sounds like. When you hear Yanny, it does not really sound like a human anymore. It sounds like an audio artifact or a heavily processed person's voice that's been pitch shifted. It does not sound like a person saying that, because no one who is saying that word would say it in such a weird way. So I feel like at its root, this recording is someone saying Laurel with lots of high frequency noise that happens to sound like a word, in the same way that when you play stuff backwards, sometimes it sounds like other words.
So I had only ever heard Laurel until you pointed out this New York Times thing. And when I crank it all the way to the right-hand side, which is Yanny or whatever, it's however you pronounce it, I can kind of hear it, but it's still difficult for me to get it. To me, it is so the raw version is so unequivocally Laurel that it stupefies me that anyone can hear anything different.
Yeah, like I said, so it's got to be either we're all old enough that our high frequency hearing is shot, and I forget when your high frequency hearing really falls off a cliff, but we might all be past that age.
We're not.
Or people are using speakers that really have just no bass whatsoever and no processing, and so all they get is the high frequencies, and then it sounds like some mutant alien saying, Yanny.
I mean, basically, where you'd probably hear it, I'm not going to test it now, but where you'd probably hear it is using the built-in speaker on a phone, because that's an area where, like, you have a tiny little speaker that it's pretty much impossible to get bass out of like the built-in speaker on the 7mm thick side of a phone. Like, you're never going to get bass out of that. So it makes total sense that maybe out of phone speakers, especially crappier ones, then you might hear that. But any kind of like headphone or regular size speaker, I can't see how you could.
Yeah, not on my phone. So on my phone, it's 100% Laurel to me. So
keep in mind, like also like Apple speakers have been really good recently. Like in the last few years, the physical speakers and Apple products have gotten significantly better than not only than where they were before, but where the competition is. So anybody on an iPhone, you're probably not hearing what other people are hearing here if they're listening on their phones.
So the next time one of these things comes up, depending on what it is, just remember that like the key, the thing that kills the source of fascination is the idea that we're all experiencing the same thing and coming away with different impressions, and that's not true. We're all experiencing different things, and then on top of that, even if we were experiencing the same thing, we would have different impressions of it. But the key, the part that really kills all these is we're not looking at the same picture, and we're not hearing the same, sound waves going through the air. And after that, there's even more crap. But even before that, like the whole premise of the fascination is killed. Maybe if we have, if Apple ruled the world and everything was carefully color corrected at the factory for all of us, maybe it would be closer. But it's like when you go see someone else's television set. Just output devices vary widely, and input devices also.
We are sponsored this week by Aftershokz bone conduction headphones. Visit atp.aftershokz.com and use code ATP30 to get $30 off the new weightless wireless Trex Air. I've been telling you for a while about bone conduction headphones. They are great because they don't put anything on or in your ears. They instead send little vibrations through little transducers that sit next to your ears into your inner ear canal through your cheekbones, and that produces sound that you can hear, but no one else can. And you still hear the world around you because your ears aren't blocked. So it's great when you're outside. You can hear things like cars go by or someone tries to talk to you. You can hear it. It's also great if you're doing stuff around the house and you just want to know, if something in the house makes a noise or if someone knocks on the door. It's very practical. So you can be listening to a podcast or taking a phone call with their wonderful built-in microphones, and you can actually participate in the world around you still and be aware of what's going on around you. There's lots of ways this is very helpful. It's also just really great in the summertime. For me, any kind of pad sitting on my ear or thing that goes into my ear, it just makes me hot and sweaty in the summertime. It's very uncomfortable. The Aftershokz bone conduction headphones don't have this problem because there's nothing in my ear. There's this little tiny contact patch next to my ear. You don't even notice it. And so it's wonderful in hot weather. I highly recommend for workouts or for just being outside in the summertime, check out the Aftershokz headphones. Now, the new model is the Trex Air. I had the Trex Titanium all last summer, and it's great. It's a great headphone. The Trex Air is even better. It's lighter. It's more comfortable. Comes in multiple colors now. Has a great range. Battery life is great. Has a great warranty if you need it. I highly recommend checking out the Aftershokz headphones. They are so practical and so useful in the summertime, especially if you spend time outside. So check it out today, atp.aftershokz.com. and use code ATP30 to get $30 off the Trex Air new weightless wireless headphones from Aftershokz. Thank you so much to Aftershokz for sponsoring our show.
We have plenty of Google follow-up to do, but before we get there, we have a little bit of Race to Listen follow-up. Ricky Bright writes in to say, Race to Listen is a big, capital B-I-G, according to Ricky, deal for China as it's a pain to type. The default behavior makes sense there. Maybe change the default based on the region. Cool. All right. Bob Burrow, who I guess was an ex-Apple employee or something like that, writes in, or wrote on Twitter, I shouldn't say writes in, wrote on Twitter that instead of just crawling websites, Google is going to start crawling people. That is deeply disturbing and also accurate.
That was in reference to Google having automated calls to businesses to find out what their hours are on holidays or whatever. And it really is, the web crawler visits every websites periodically and updates their Google search index and stuff like that. And I guess their web crawler would be crawling websites and trying to pull, holiday hours and hours from the website so Google can surface that to people who are doing searches. But in cases where they can't get that information, they will stop crawling the web. And I like this of crawling people, of saying, we are Google and our computers may contact you to extract information from you for the purpose of serving that information to millions of people who search for things. And it sounds creepy.
It is creepy.
Well, like I said about the creepiness thing, things that initially sound creepy, you eventually just come to get used to. As a user of the service, I can see the value in having accurate information that would otherwise be impossible to get without doing it by a human. I guess the Amazon way to do it would be to hire a bunch of low-wage people whose life is partially funded by government subsidies, so you can pay them less than a living wage, and have them call all the businesses and find out the answers. And the Google way is to pay a smaller number of people to write a program to do that same job.
That's a pretty accurate summary. Michael Love writes, another Google Assistant voice call issue. Isn't it recording the call? And so wouldn't it be running afoul of the law in two-party consent states? What that means, and I am not a lawyer, but what that means is you can only record a conversation if both parties have agreed to the fact that it's going to be recorded. If it's not recording a call, the call, continues Michael, how can I check its work and make sure the appointment was actually made as I requested?
Although I will say that if you're wanting to listen to the recordings of the call that were placed on your behalf, then maybe you shouldn't be placing these calls through a robot. Like that kind of seems to ruin the point of the convenience of this. Like,
well, that's the accessibility angle, like I was saying before, that I'd imagine in cases where you need the computer to help you make a call, just as an assistive device,
right? Yeah,
you would want to participate, not just listen to it afterwards, but like be there when it's happening. So again, so you can nudge the conversation in a particular direction, because you are trying to use it as an assistive device. You are not delegating responsibility to do this, right? So. But anyway, as for the recording thing, I assume it's not recording for the reasons they said. Like, it just doesn't seem like a thing you can do, because it's using regular phone lines, and the laws having to do with regular phone lines were from a bygone era when we made laws that tried to protect people's privacy, and they're much stricter for what you can do over telephones than they are what you can do over the internet. The internet, you can do whatever the hell you can get away with, but the laws for phones are very clear. So I imagine they're not recording it, which I think, as I said last week, if you're trusting this thing to be successful, like if I've talked about how I had trouble with phone trees when they first came out, but I think for something like this, especially in the beginning, since it's going to fail so much of the time, say I used this thing and said, hey Dingus, make me an appointment, make me a reservation at a restaurant, blah blah blah, I would spend the rest of the day wondering whether the confirmation that it has made that reservation for me is true. I'd be like, but did you? And you'd wonder, and you get to the restaurant, and you'd be like, God, my phone told me it made a reservation, but the thing breaks all the time. Did it actually make a reservation? And you would get there and be like, we have no idea who you are, and we have no idea what reservation you're talking to. And what are you going to say? I think I told my phone to call you. Yeah, what evidence do you have of that? Look at this message. That's just a text message. That didn't call us at all. It's like, no, but I told it this, and then it called you behind the scenes, and then it told me I had a reservation. And they'd be like, well, your phone lied to you. Like, I don't know. I just wouldn't trust it. And to trust something like that, kind of like, the difference between Siri in the early days and maybe still today and the Amazon Echo is you learn to trust it after it's successful a lot of times, right? Like you realize, oh, the Echo can hear me and it does do what I asked. So the first couple of times you're a little bit shaky, but eventually you come to trust it. But like I said, I don't think people are going to come to trust this, because I think its reliability will be very, very low.
So to go back half step with regard to recording, we don't know if they are being recorded, as far as I'm aware anyway. But a friend of the show, Matt Drance, wrote a couple of tweets about this. And so Matt writes, so I have some questions about this section of the Duplex blog post. And he posts a screenshot and a link. And the summary of the screenshot is that Google is saying that Duplex is capable of carrying out sophisticated conversations, and it completes the majority of its tasks fully autonomously without human involvement. The system has a self-monitoring capability which allows it to recognize the tasks it cannot complete autonomously. And in this case, it signals to a human operator who can complete the task. To train the system in a new domain, we used real-time supervised training. This is comparable to the training practices of many disciplines, blah, blah, blah. But what Matt points out is, and now I'm quoting from him, so you throw a request over the fence to Assistant, which may or may not bring a total stranger into the call with my doctor, my therapist, my lawyer. Please tell me I'm missing something. And that was a use case, or not really a use case, but that was just a wrinkle that I had never even considered, which I thought was really fascinating. Is, we're potentially exposing really, really private information or data, I guess, about ourselves to potentially humans at Google that we may not particularly want to have that information about.
But you don't have to worry about that, because the user agreement they make you blindly click through to get to it signs over all your rights to every piece of privacy in your entire life to Google, and says that you agree that it's okay that Google knows everything about you. So don't worry, Google won't get in trouble.
True. But I don't know. It just seemed really, really weird to me. And it's tough because I I do appreciate, as we mentioned last episode, as you mentioned, John, a minute ago, I do appreciate that there are people for whom this could be a just world-changing product, in that, you either are incapable of using the phone, or perhaps using the phone is very, very difficult, or something like that. And so for an accessibility purpose, this is really, really brilliant technology. But I think the thing that we all keep coming back to, and I don't remember if it was Marco or maybe Jason or Mike on Upgrade, somebody said recently, the thing that I think we all find most creepy is that it's not identifying itself as a computer, which brings us to our next bit of follow-up. Google says its human-sounding robot will identify itself on the phone calls. So apparently Google noticed that the internet was not happy. And they're saying that, that in the future they will identify themselves as non-human at some point during the call.
That really takes the wind out of their sails, though, because most of the wow factor of that demo was the fact that the computer sounded a lot like a person, down to the pauses and the ums and the whatever. If you take out the ums and, just leave the time gap pauses, it really highlights the parts where you notice that this thing on the other end of the line says the same word exactly the same way every time, like it doesn't have much variety, right? You can tell it's artificial, and the ums really sell it. But if it identifies itself as an automation, but then it does and stuff, it's like, come on, computer, like I don't have time for you to, play human. Just you identified yourself as not human. Don't keep trying to do things the human do. Be efficient, be a machine, and get the job done. Make the sale, make the reservation, whatever.
Also, Hey You DVD just posted a link to Reddit in the chat, and I'm going to read this whole thing. It's not very long, but it's fascinating. It's titled, "Today I Realized I Live in the Future," and it reads, "I got a call at work today. A woman called me claiming to be Google Maps, and she wanted to know our opening hours. We went through what hours we were open for weekdays, clarified the weekends, and said goodbye. She never told me her name, and her responses were a bit odd, but I put it down to a language or cultural barrier, though she spoke very, very cleanly in English, as her accent was Southeast Asian, and I live in Australia. It was otherwise unremarkable. I told the store manager, I'm an assistant manager, and their first response was it a person? I said, yeah, of course. He said, are you sure? And then it dawned on me. I checked Google and our hours were already updated, but one day was slightly wrong. It's logistically impossible to have the manpower to call every establishment and confirm their opening hours. I wasn't talking to someone from Google Maps. I was talking to Google Maps. I was talking to a computer, and I had absolutely no idea. Wow.
Yeah, the main thing these things have going for them in terms of making people think they're humans is that humans have widely varying behavior on the phone, right? Especially with the fidelity of phone lines, you can't hear the sort of audio artifacting and like computeriness of the actual speech synthesis. It all just becomes mush over a pot system. And then you're just left with, this person just sounded weird, and like maybe they weren't a native speaker, but they didn't have an accent. But anyway, people are weird, whatever.
Couple of quick topics to start us off. First, I wanted to recognize that on Recode, actually a couple of weeks ago almost, there was a post which is entitled, "Amazon employees are outraged by their company's opposition to a plan to add more diversity to its board." And my understanding of this entire story is that Amazon did the same thing Apple did, which is they said, no, we're not going to go out of our way to add diversity to our board. Our board is our board, and basically go screw yourselves. But apparently a whole bunch of Amazon employees have been getting really angry about this. And seemingly Amazon has said, okay, no, actually, we'll take this seriously and we'll try to make our board a little more diverse. And I just wanted to call attention to this because Apple has gone through this exact same thing, and they basically told us to pound sand. And, well, not us specifically, but they've told the people who have brought this complaint to pound sand. And I just find that kind of gross. And I just wanted to say that, hey, this is kind of cool that Amazon is doing something that Apple refuses to. And that's neat.
I still think it's, like I said when we last discussed this, has little actually to do with the nature of the shareholder proposal, right? Like, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be like, we should all wear blue hats on Wednesday. And a lot to do with the fact that companies like Amazon and Apple and any big company did not want to be told what to do by a section of shareholders, right? They'll be told what to do by majority shareholders or a very large percentage shareholders, but small activist group of shareholders trying to tell the company what to do, not just like broadly speaking, but specifically, you must agree to this plan and it becomes a thing that you have to do as a public company. They don't want to be bossed around and say, you're not the boss of me, right? And so it looks bad when the thing they're telling you to do is probably a thing that you want to do. Like Apple has tons of diversity initiatives and so on and so forth, but these things usually come down to, you must do exactly X, Y, and Z. And Apple says, all right, we want to, if we want to improve diversity on our board, we want to do it our way. We don't want the terms to be dictated to. We don't want you, small group of shareholders, to convince a larger group to vote for this thing, and now we're beholden to your exact plan of an exact, milestones and everything. And so it's not a good look for any of the companies. And they should. Amazon seems like they're handling it much better, but I bet the outcome is Amazon says, we now have a new program to improve the diversity of our board, but they won't be bound by it in the same way they would have been if all the shareholders voted for this thing. You know what I mean? So that's why these companies just reflexively recommend against any shareholder recommendation to do anything ever, because shareholders are not the boss of them until they are.
Exactly. And so rounding out the Casey complains about every public company episode, Twitter is a bunch of jerks. And as much as I love Twitter, basically they can go f*** themselves. Because they have announced today, as we record, that they are replacing the API they provide that basically is behind any of the third-party Twitter clients that any of us may use. And they're replacing it with their Twitter's account activity API, which is not nearly as full-featured as what it replaces and is hilariously expensive. So Sean Heber of the Twitterific folks at Icon Factory, he wrote, the public pricing that I'm seeing shows Twitter's account activity API pricing as $2,899 a month to get activity updates for 250 users. Needless to say, we have more than 250 users. It's possible an enterprise deal could be made, but it seems likely to be affordable. And so you can assume that that Twitterific, that Tweetbot has many, many thousands of users, if not tens of thousands of users, and you can see how this quickly becomes unsustainable. And in fact, friend of the show, Craig Hockenberry, wrote, the math works out to about $10 per user per month to get push notifications. And that means that they would have to, in order to, stay afloat, they would have to push that cost down to all of their users. So Craig continues, on a platform where people balk at spending 99 cents.
Don't forget about Apple's 30%
Yeah,
cut.
exactly. So it's really like, what is it, $15, $16 or something like that per user per month? It's just not tenable. And so, Gruber wrote earlier tonight, and I don't have the quote in front of me at the moment, but he had a really good analogy, and he said in so many words, it's like breaking up with somebody by just being a really, really big jerk until they go away. And that's kind of what Twitter's doing with third-party clients right now. And it not only makes me sad, but it makes me friggin' angry. I don't know, maybe I'm going through the 5 stages, right? But it just makes me angry because it seems unnecessary. Like they already have something that is working, and it doesn't seem like they're doing a lot to update it. I can't imagine that just keeping it working as is that terribly expensive or difficult. But they really want to tell all the third-party developers to, as I said earlier, pound sand. And it's just frustrating.
They have. I saw the thread that Craig linked to of like there was some party from Twitter saying, "Oh, well, we have a new set of microservices that are implemented in a more robust way, and we're transitioning to them." And like that could be a reason. But the most frustrating thing to me from the outside of looking at this eternal struggle between third party developers and Twitter is that Twitter does things that affect third party clients and explains them in a way that never mentions third party clients. They always explain them like, oh, we're doing this for this reason and for that or whatever. It's like, yeah, but you see how it's doing this bad thing. Hey, Twitter, how you feel about this bad thing? Is it a side effect? You can't say you're not aware of it. You know it's happening. Last time, I remember they were going to do this and they said, oh, we have to think about it for a while. Like, we'll delay it. And I was like, how does that help you? All you're doing is trying to wait until...
Thought about it for like 3 weeks.
Yeah, we're waiting for the bad PR to die down and just do the same thing again. And it's like, address it head on. I think I said this in the Rectifs episode where Merlin and I were yelling about Twitter clients. Like, decide what you want. Do you want third-party clients or do you not? If you don't want them, get rid of them. If you do want them, support them. But like, address the issue head on instead of just constantly saying other things other than, people out there saying, you're killing us. And they're like, we're really improving our API and blah, blah, blah. It's like, what? But just, you have to talk to those people. You have to say, You have to say, we're sorry, but that's just the way it is. You should stop making third-party clients. So you have to say, we're sorry and we won't do this. But instead saying, well, actually, we're doing it for this reason. I don't care what reason you're doing it for. These are the effects that it's having, and you should address them head on, and they don't seem capable of doing that.
I mean, I have a slightly different take on this. I mean, first of all, there was a great alternative take on Connected this week, led, I think, mostly by Mike, where basically saying, like, this kind of doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Even if you use these apps, none of these things are like should be deal killers for you as the user. Now, whether they are for the apps is a different story. But as the user, this is not the end of the world, probably.
Well, the DM one is kind of the end of the world. Now you got to use a different app for DMs.
Yeah, that's kind of that's a bigger problem. But it's easy for us as fans and users. Well, as users of Twitter. It's easy for us who've been using third-party Twitter apps forever to look at this and to look at the continued slow jerkiness of Twitter towards third-party apps since like 2012, and to ascribe all of their actions to this motive of, like Gruber's excellent analogy of, like, like somebody who is just trying to break up with their significant other and just being a jerk about it instead of just telling them. And that could be possible. That could be what's happening here.
That's what he's saying. That's what it's like. Not that that's their motivation, because again, if their motivation was to get rid of third-party clients, they would just do it. It's like that this is from the outside. It seems like that's what's happening, but like neglect or like just not caring or apathy or just equally reasonable explanations. But from the outside, it just seems to us that they're just being a jerk, and we're trying to figure out why you're trying to be a jerk. Either break up with us or don't.
Right. But I think ultimately, though, I think it is a combination of ignorance and apathy, and just like, because look at the way Twitter runs the rest of Twitter. You think they could have a coherent vision and solid plan that ran from 2012 until now about anything? Twitter doesn't even understand Twitter themselves. They don't even understand the basics of their own service. They're barely keeping that company running. They're barely keeping the product usable. They're actively fighting against the product and its users all the time with tons of crazy mismanagement, horrible directions they go in and then abandon. Twitter sucks at running Twitter. So I think it's very, very likely that the actual, causes of their behavior here are not some gradual plan to kill third-party apps. I think they just are doing things that they see as reactionary to other forces, other, API desires, or other, platform initiatives, or God knows what else they call it, that happen to hit third-party apps on the way. But I don't think anybody influential inside Twitter gives 2 seconds of thought to any third-party apps. So I think all of this is just it's just collateral damage from things inside that have nothing to do with them at all.
But last time they did delay the thing, though. They were like, "Oh, people are angry. They immediately had a reply and said, "I see lots of people are angry. We'll sure that we'll give you 90 days notice." And that was an immediate reaction. So I think they are hearing it, but they're like kind of, Spindler style. You guys don't get that reference. They're hiding under their desk when the people get angry, and they're like, "We realize something we're doing is making some people angry, and we don't really." I don't care about those people, but I don't like being yelled at. So if I just hide under my desk for a while, and then wait, are they calmed down now? Okay, let's go back to what we were doing, because they don't care. And you're right. There's no 6-year sustained plan to do anything at Twitter. But the frustrating thing, corporate communication wise, is you should at least address the issue people are mad at you about. Like every answer that I've seen from Twitter about the specific issue never says head on anything about the third party clients or whatever. And so, yeah, it's continued indecision, and an indecision eventually becomes a decision, and it becomes like, oh, in effect, you're being a jerk to us for 6 years, and eventually we'll go away. But if that is a goal of yours, to get rid of third party clients, you would have done it already, because you are entirely empowered to do it. So it's like, it's not a goal, and we don't like being yelled at. But if we do it eventually as a side effect of a bunch of other flailings that we're doing, we're mostly okay with that. But we'll never tell you any of this. And every time you ask about it, we'll just say something else about why we're making these changes. And I bet the reasons they're making the changes are true. I bet they are changing to new API endpoints that are better and have better performance. And I bet they are phasing out the old API endpoints because they were badly implemented and inefficient. All of that is probably 100% true. But that's not what people want to hear. People want to hear, yeah, but by doing this, you're having this effect. How do you feel about that? We don't like it. We're being hurt by it. Can you help us out? And last time they said, whoa, don't yell at us. we'll take the time to think about this. Now they're just like, okay, how about now? Can we just do the same thing now? It's incredibly frustrating, especially since, as many people pointed out, like, oh, they don't want people to use third-party clients that, or at least they don't care about third-party clients. First of all, most people don't use third-party clients, so it's not like this is a big problem. Oh, half our user base is using third-party clients. We can't control their user experience. No, it's not true. It's a vanishingly small percentage. And second of all, we want them to use our first-party clients. They're canned their first-party clients for the Mac, so they just want people to use their website, I guess, which is their first-party client. iOS, they still have the client. Anyway, they're just making a mess, and it's disappointing, and I'm glad that a lot of the features that they're canning or destroying don't affect me that much because I don't care about notifications. I don't have any push stuff enabled. But DMs would affect me, and if I lose the ability to use Twitter DMs, I will just stop using Twitter DMs, and I'll just use something else for that. Use iMessage or whatever, because I'm not going to use a DM API that has like a 3 to 6 minute lag every time I send a message.
It just makes me sad. I mean, to be honest, it's probably for the best that I slowly wean myself off Twitter because I spend too much damn time on it. But it just makes me sad. And again, it's, I guess, in a way, the same problem I have with the Google Duplex thing. Like, just call a spade a spade. Hi, this is a computer calling you on behalf of Casey Liss. I'd like to schedule an appointment, please. Hi, I'm Twitter, and I want third-party clients to go away. So this is what we're doing.
But they don't. If they want them to go away, they could make them go away. They're just it's benign neglect.
Well, I think the thing is they want them to go away, but they don't want to be the one with the smoking gun after it's over.
If they want to not make people mad at them, the 6-year strategy of making people constantly mad at them is not like those same people. Like, those people aren't like, if you had to say this was a strategy, it would be a strategy of like barely appeasing them. But as Marco pointed out, the idea that Twitter had any 6-year strategy that was consistent is ridiculous anyway. So it's not like they're consciously barely appeasing them, but in effect, because they're so reactive when people yell at them, they are always walking that line between just making people incredibly angry at them all the time and then slightly appeasy, and then angry and then appease them a little bit and then angry, and then it's just, and meanwhile the state of third-party Twitter clients just gets worse and worse over time.
You know what we should do? We should just have all the white Nazis use third-party apps, and then they will get priority support, and Twitter will do everything they want.
Oh, good thinking.
And then all this stuff will get fixed.
Brilliant idea.
That reminds me of the hell banning feature that they just added. Do you know about that Twitter added hell banning? Do you know what hell banning is?
Yeah, where it's like where you post and you don't realize no one's seeing your stuff, but no one's seeing your stuff.
Yep. So it's not actually quite that bad as that no one sees it, but like basically certain people's tweets do not appear in a thread. Like, so if you're looking at a thread, if anybody's looking at a thread and they participated in the thread, certain people's tweets don't appear. The bad people, bot accounts, Nazis, all that sort of stuff like that, right? Which sounds like a good idea because it's been tried many times in forums and everything, and it's kind of good if you don't like getting yelled at, because what you're just hoping is that the people don't realize that they're hellbanned. That's the whole idea. Eventually, in forums, people could realize, but in Twitter, maybe they just think people are ignoring them, and most of the time, these are just like, create a new account, spew a bunch of invective, get your account suspended, repeat, loops, so they'll never care, right? They're hellbanned. But the key with all these things is, okay, how does Twitter decide who gets hellbanned? And the first place I saw anything having to do with hellbanning on Twitter was because some person's account was hellbanned because they told a Nazi to go screw themselves, right? That was the person who was hellbanned. The person who told the Nazi to go screw themselves because they used screw or something or said an insulting word. The whole point of online trolls is they figure out how your system works, and then they make 500 sock puppet accounts to report your account and get it hellbanned, and you don't notice. And so, the concept of hell banning, I'm not entirely against, but the idea that Twitter would correctly identify the accounts to actually ban versus having the system entirely gamed by the bad people to essentially hell ban, everyone else who's against them, it's just. There's so little that Twitter could do these days where I think that the result of it will be an improvement to the service, even when they ostensibly are doing more or less the right thing. So anyway, I'm assuming I'm hellbanned right now. Sorry if you can't see my tweets.
We are sponsored this week by Squarespace. Start building your website today at squarespace.com/ATP. Enter offer code ATP at checkout to get 10% off. Make your next move with a beautiful website from Squarespace. Squarespace makes it incredibly easy to make very professional looking, highly functional websites. And whether your skill level is nothing or whether you're an expert, you can make a website with Squarespace that looks incredible, that has amazing built-in functionality from things like image galleries and cover pages and splash pages to blogs, portfolios, embedded videos, podcasts. You can host an entire podcast on Squarespace if you want to. All of this is all available. Even if you want to have a built-in storefront to sell digital or physical goods, these are all included in every Squarespace plan. You can even buy domains there now if you want to do that. If you want to have everything in one spot and have it all be super easy to set up, Squarespace does domains now too. And you get all of that with intuitive, easy-to-use tools. Everything is drag and drop, live previewing. It's just an incredible technology stack of Squarespace that's so easy to use that you can do whatever you need to do in like an hour, and you're done. And then you can move on to what you actually are doing your project for, because you shouldn't be spending your time messing around with your website very much. You should just get it up there, get it done, get it nice, and then move on with your project. That's what Squarespace lets you do. So check it out today. Start a free trial. You can see for yourself. There's no credit card required. Start a free trial and see how good Squarespace can be for you at squarespace.com/ATP. When you decide to sign up, make sure to head to squarespace.com/ATP and use the offer code ATP to get 10% off your first purchase. That is squarespace.com/ATP, offer code ATP. Thank you so much for Squarespace for sponsoring our show.
What else happened at Google I.O.? We talked a whole lot about the Google Duplex thing. Was there anything else interesting that happened? What else went on?
Well, first of all, let's preface that by saying, are any of us qualified to even know what's relevant, let alone to have seen enough of it to talk about it, let alone to talk about it, well?
I watched it. I did my homework. I assume you two didn't.
No, Of course not. Why would I already gave 14 minutes of my life for that, and that was too many.
Yeah, it was pretty long. There's some downtime sections there, but it's good to see the whole thing to see how Google is presenting its face to the world. That middle section on Duplex really was the important part, though.
Yeah,
but yeah, there's just a few odds and ends here. One of them is about that Google is now on the bandwagon with their assistant, where they have what do they call it? Continued conversation, where you don't have to say "Hey Dingus" in front of every single command. You say "Hey Dingus" and then a command, and then it's still listening to you for a little period of time. So, I think we talked about that with Amazon a couple months ago, and then now Google has got it. I'm sure Apple will have it in like 6 to 8 years, so it'll be fine. Compound commands was something that they demoed, and we talked about that as well, of being able to, say play the song and turn the volume up, which is something that HomePod can already do, at least in the domain of music. Google was showing off particular how they handle interesting compounds. This was a good demo of where it seems like an easy problem because you just look for like an and or something, and then where to split the thing up. But they showed two commands that if you just blindly split an and, it would get the wrong answer. So it has to understand the sentences and understand this is part one of the command and this is the second command, as opposed to a compound command that is applying to two things that are anded in it. So I thought that was neat. And like I said, that's an area where I think HomePod actually can do that in the limited domain of music, although probably not as sophisticated as Google Assistant can do. There was Pretty Please mode, which this is starting to get into Google's sort of lifestyle part, where they're trying to. This is interesting. Apple does this a little bit, and Nintendo does it a little bit too. This is the first time I'd really seen Google leaning on this. The idea that we make electronics and software and servers, and we recognize that sometimes people use our products more than they want to. I don't know how else to phrase that. Like, we make things and we give them to you and you can use them, but sometimes you feel bad like you're using them too much. I'm on my phone too much. I spend too long browsing the web, right? Whatever it may be. Although I would imagine that, like, for the audio things, no one is like, this is a great stereo system, but we also have a feature just in case you feel guilty for listening to too much music. Every once in a while, our stereo will come on and say, you've been listening to music for about an hour. Are you sure you don't want to stop and go outside? That doesn't happen with stereo systems for the most part. But for products like a lot of the products that Google and Apple and lots of other tech companies make, that is a common feature. Nintendo's consoles for a little while now have said, you've been playing games for 2 hours. Maybe you should get up and stretch or go outside, because the perception is that if you play games for 2 hours, maybe you should take a break. But no one wants a stereo that says you've been listening to music for 2 hours. Maybe you should take a break. Anyway, Google has a whole wing of their products now that's like, you seem like you've been using your phone a lot. Maybe you should do something else for a little while. And they call this digital well-being. And there's another feature about that I'll get to in a second. But the pretty please mode is similar to that, in that, say you are someone who has a bunch of cylinders in your house, like all of us do, and you have kids, like all of us do, and the kids talk to the cylinders. There is this, I'm not going to say alarmist parenting. Parents are alarmed about many things. Oh my goodness, what's happening to our children? Something is different in my children's life than was in my life. Are we accidentally teaching our children something bad? Are we losing our children? So this one is, are we teaching our children to be rude by having them order around our cylinders? Like, my child is mean when it talks to my cylinder and demands that the cylinder do things, right? I think that's a little silly, because if your child is a jerk, it's not the fault of the cylinder, probably. But, parents have concerns and want to deal with it. And so pretty please mode is a mode in which your cylinder, I don't know if it requires, but it really wants you to ask it to do something in a nice way. And when you do ask it in a nice way by saying please or whatever, the cylinder acknowledges that you've done that and thank you for asking so nicely, right? I don't know if it's a jerk about it and says, you didn't say Simon Says, but the idea is that our products are too efficient and little kids can use them, and maybe little kids are being bossy. So let's change our product to make it worse, but make it so the kids learn politeness, which, as a parent, I'm going to say, if your cylinder could help my kid learn to be more polite, I'm not going to argue with that, but I think adults would not particularly like that. I wonder if it only works for kids, because the Google cylinders can identify different voices. And the other digital well-being thing was like, say it's nighttime and it seems like you're on your phone a lot. Digital well-being has a wind down feature that you can tell it to say, if it's like 11 p.m. and I'm still on my phone, please try to encourage me to go to bed. So the new version of Android will transition the entire UI to black and white to try to make the phone less engaging to you, and it will remind you to go to bed. And I love the idea of taking all the color out of your phone, like transitioning your phone to black. I'll be like, haha, you fool, I used a monochrome Mac for many years. This is not less appealing to me. You know how many hours I spent staring at a monochrome screen? Not even grayscale. It's just black pixels and white pixels. It wasn't less engaging. You couldn't get me off that thing. So like, Google is literally, it has a feature to make its products worse to encourage you to stop using them. And it sounds absurd, but this is a thing I think people want, because I talked about this on RecDiffs, like self-hacks. Sometimes the way you can accomplish a goal, like I wish I used my phone less, is not by remembering to use your phone less, but by in your moments of clarity and rationality where you realize you want to use your phone less, sabotage your own life in a way that will either remind you to use your phone less or force you to use your phone less. Like self-hacks. I need to make this change in my life, because if I don't, willpower alone won't cause me to do this. Like I said on the show, like not having ice cream in the house if you're trying not to eat ice cream. You could just not eat ice cream, but it's much easier to not eat ice cream when it's not in the house. So when you're in the mindset, I really want to do this, when you're at the store, don't buy the ice cream, because future you will thank you for that, because you're like, you know what, if there was ice cream in the house, I would eat it now. But thankfully, before, I had the presence of mind to hack myself. So I suppose when the wind down feature comes on, you'd be like, oh, but I still want to use my phone. But now it'll be like, oh, but my phone is getting annoying and I should really go to bed anyway. Just giving you that little extra nudge. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Apple introducing features like this, because as absurd as they sound, I think they're features that people might actually like and use. I don't know. Would either of you ever configure one of your electronics to tell you to stop using it?
No.
I think I would. I don't do the best with putting my phone down or away in times when it shouldn't be in my hand. And so like I've done a lot of these self-hacks with varying degrees of success. Lately, I've been leaving my phone on a different floor of the house. So when I think, I wonder, if so-and-so was in such and such TV show, like, it doesn't matter. I don't need to look that up.
You should ask your cylinder. It knows.
Well, and actually, yeah, now I can ask the cylinder, but I'm just trying to think of a stupid example. And so I've been leaving the phone on the wrong floor, if you will. Additionally, I've had Do Not Disturb come on by 5 in the evening. I used to have it come on at 10, which is about when I go to bed, except on Wednesdays. Hi, fellas. And so I've moved it up to 5 in the evening, such that basically once I'm home from work, I really won't be bothered unless somebody really wants to get a hold of me. And so I've been doing little things like that. So I think I would probably turn on these sorts of warnings or reminders or what have you. You know, I wouldn't, and like, do not disturb while driving. I think that's another good example. I have that on. And sometimes when I'm at a stoplight, I tell it, shut up and go away. But sometimes I see it and I'm like, you know what? I really should not do the thing I'm trying to do right now. So I would do it, but that's just me.
What do you think about the pretty please cylinder thing? If you could put your cylinder into a mode that requires you to be nice to it.
So given that we have a 3.5-year-old in the house, and I like to think of him as pretty polite. He's my perfect little precious angel. He does no wrong. No, I think anything we could do to encourage consistency on please and thank you would be helpful. And I don't really actually care if he says please or thank you to Alexa, but I do care that he says please and thank you to people. And I don't think it's useful to try to explain to him, no, that's not really a person, so you don't have to worry about them. But when you're talking to mommy or daddy or other people, you do need to say please and thank you. And so I have been meaning to turn this on, but I haven't gotten around to doing it yet. But I'm on board with it.
Marco, you're gonna say please and thank you to your cylinders?
No.
See, if I think of it from the kid angle, parents will take anything they can get to help along with parenting. Like you said, if it's going to make my kid more polite, great. But there is another aspect of parenting a child in a house full of cylinders, as preparing them for their future life and essentially making the distinction between something that's a person and something that's not a person. And I get that, like, the habits that you build on the non-person can transfer to the person, but on the other hand, efficiently navigating a world of computer agents and stuff is a skill, and it's not particularly efficient to pretend the computer is a person, right? Especially for very young kids. Like, I guess it's a fun thing to do, and kids believe lots of magical things, but at a certain point, the skill that you want your kid to have transitions from learn to be nice to inanimate objects to learn to efficiently use, computers to accomplish tasks, because that will be part of your life. And even perhaps to the fact of learn to identify when it's not a computer, when it's not a person on the other end of the phone line or whatever, so that you can switch modes essentially and switch into, last week's show, was it playing the video game?
Playing them like a video game.
Yeah, playing it like a video game, because that's a skill you should have. Like, you should understand how these systems work. You should know that they exist, and you should treat them. It's not about being nice or not nice, but it's about, having the appropriate interactions with them. Because the appropriate interactions, like what's next? Like, put please in your Google queries? Of course you're not, because that's not efficient, and Google is not a person. It's just that if you start making it sound a little bit like a person, I'm not saying be abusive. I think that was, when the hell did that come up? I think that was IRL talk, if you should be mean to your robot butler.
Oh, yeah, yep.
Right. Like, so there is a crossover point where you actually are training people to be terrible to humans, but I think the voice is not quite at that crossover point. I don't know. I have to think about it some more. I would like to try it just to see what the failure modes are, and if it is really mean to you and won't do what you said because you didn't say please. Because people do like positive reinforcement, and if you say please and it's nice to you back, that actually could make the product feel better to people, because they're like, oh, my cylinder was nice to me. Right? It's already kind of nice. It sets my timers and tells me about stuff that I ask, and is generally pleasant when it does it. But if it congratulated me on being polite, I think I would say, oh, I feel better about that, even though I know you're just a computer program. So that could actually be a user benefit. Not so much changing my behavior as making me feel better each time I use it.
I totally hear you about teaching the kids the difference between computers and not computers. But at 3.5, I don't think that's the battle I want to fight. The battle I want to fight at 3.5 is say please and thank you. At, 5 or 7, I don't know what the appropriate age is, I will absolutely fight the battle, or not fight the battle, but, explain, you don't really need to say please to a thing that doesn't exist, or that's not, a human, but you should say please to other people. I do need to navigate that. I agree with you. I just don't think that for my particular family at this particular stage in our lives, I don't think Declan needs to be worrying about the distinction between the two. And maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, but that's the way I look at it.
And also, like I said, if it really depends on your kids. Like we just had a sleepover party here with a bunch of 10 and 11-year-old girls in the house, and they love talking to cylinders and asking them to play music. And they're all talking at once, and they're all yelling over each other, and they're all excited about what they can do. And I can say I heard everything they said. You couldn't help but hear them. They're very loud. It's a small house. And they were never mean to the cylinders. They were excited about the cylinders. They laughed when the cylinder would make a mistake. I did eventually convince them. I had to force them. I went to them and nudged them because they were playing music on the Google Home Mini, and the HomePod is like 5 feet away. And I'm like, come on, people. Come on. Like, they're cranking the volume on the Google Home Mini is the size of like a softball, right? And the HomePod's sitting there going like, I have 20 speakers that fire in a million directions. It can adjust to the room shape. And they're like, we'll play it. So I got them to change and talk to the HomePod. And they get confused about the trigger words a lot, which is, they don't care about these distinctions. They just want the stuff to happen. Sometimes they'd both be playing at the same time or slightly offset, which was, it was a little bit of a mess. Anyway, they were never mean. They were never mean to the cylinders. They never got mad at them. They never, were bossy or whatever. And so I feel like it's kind of like if your kid was being bossy to their teddy bear, it's not the teddy bear's fault. There's no alteration in the teddy bear's demeanor or appearance that will change your child from yelling at it. The kid's being bossy to the teddy bear is a sign that something else is wrong. Why is your kid angry? Whatever the problem is, it's probably not the teddy bear. So if your kid is yelling at their cylinder, changing the cylinder to ask them to be polite is addressing the symptom and not the root problem, I would say.
All right. We have probably half an hour to an hour left of the show, so I think we still have time possibly to bring up the next topic. Let's talk about keyboards, Marco. There's a class action lawsuit, and apparently one of you wants to talk about it, and that is not me.
I didn't put it in here, so it must be John. I was just open to say that, Apple gets class action lawsuits filed against it all the time. They usually are BS. They go nowhere. Class action lawsuits are generally scams because the only people who tend to make any real money out of them are the lawyers. Usually they're not news. I'm still not sure this one is news. But it happens to be on a topic that I talk about a lot, so I suppose that's why it's in here. But yeah, there has been a class action lawsuit filed in California that alleges that. So it's regarding the keyboards in the 12-inch MacBook and 2016 forward MacBook Pros that I love to bag on so much because they are highly controversial in feel and attributes, and I fall on the they suck side of that controversy. But of course, they're also fairly unreliable compared to the previous one. So anyway, this lawsuit alleges not only that they are unreliable and that Apple is refusing to fix them under warranty the way they should, but also that Apple knowingly put them in the MacBook Pros after the 2015 12-inch MacBook. Basically, it's alleging they knew they were defective and put them in the other laptops and have been continuing to sell them anyway, even knowing that they would fail at a high rate and be defective. And that's honestly plausible. If you look at the sequence of events, I've been saying this for a long time now. Apple released the 12-inch MacBook. It had the butterfly keyboard for the first time, and those failed at a very high rate, seemingly, anecdotally. And you can say this is all anecdotes and everything, but that's all we have. Apple doesn't reveal these numbers, so it's all we have. Is you can ask around, you can hear on Twitter or stuff like that. And it did seem like right from the start there was a seemingly unusually high failure rate on those keyboards, even the 12-inch. And this was a year and a half before the MacBook Pros shipped with them. So anyway, this lawsuit is alleging that Apple knew they were higher than usual failing rates and shipped them in all their computers anyway. And that does seem plausible. Apple might have known. We're probably never going to know. This is probably never going to reach a court. And Apple's probably never going to have any kind of testimony put on the record. Chances are it's either going to fizzle out or it's going to settle for some, thing that makes the lawyers a lot of money and makes nothing for any of the people who have these laptops. So chances are this will go nowhere. But I think it is noteworthy that it has reached this point. This is not the first time this has happened. Apple has had class actions in the past for various product flaws, some of them valid, most of them not. So again, it's hard to know how newsworthy this is or how valid this is or if this will actually change anything at all. But it is at least noteworthy that it does seem to be an actual problem. What they're alleging is both pretty horrible on Apple's part and also kind of plausible. So, it's worth, looking back on in a year and seeing where it ended up. but it's probably not. It's probably not going to have like breaking news all the time.
So the reason I put it in here, and I should have actually put that the petition. I think there was a petition, online petition, change.org online petition to I forget what they were asking. Probably something similar like extend warranty repairs and fix your keyboards or whatever. The and class action lawsuit, because lots of people send these to us. Hey, did you hear about this class action lawsuit? Did you sign this petition? Can you amplify this? Can you retweet it? Can you send it to all your people so they will sign the petition and so they will join learn about the class action lawsuit? And I wanted to put them in here to explain basically why I tend not to do that. And I think Marco did explain it well. Class action lawsuits are not. Just because it's a class action lawsuit doesn't mean anything. You can sue anyone for anything, right? Doesn't mean you're going to succeed, or doesn't mean that even if you get a big settlement, doesn't mean that you were right. It just means that lawyers smell money. So yes, this particular problem, like so many problems before it, has raised to the level where lawyers know that they can extract. Lawyers think and are probably right that they can extract money from Apple over it, which says nothing about the validity of the issue. We've discussed the validity of the issue at length, and none of it, my opinion of the validity of the issue is not changed by the filing of the lawsuit. Similarly, online petitions are an interesting signal to say, is there enough, are people worked up enough about this to click a couple buttons on a web page? That's a pretty low bar. Like I've seen online petitions with 5 to 10 to 100 times as many signatures for a minor change in a video game. So, just because people are willing to click on a web page and quote unquote sign a petition doesn't really mean anything about the importance, severity, or correctness of an issue. But it's another signal. It shows that the bad publicity about this particular issue has reached the stage where someone decided to make a petition and a lot of people signed it. And again, it doesn't mean that the issue is valid, because lots of people have signed lots of petitions about lots of things related to Apple over the years. But it does mean that this particular issue, which we all think has some validity, is getting traction among more people than just a slightly bigger circle than just Apple podcasters, I suppose. And all this signal, like it's a signal to us and to know how things are progressing, but it's also a signal to Apple. And I think Apple also has a similar opinion on this. Class action lawsuits, we get sued all the time. Some Apple lawyer should come on and say, how many times a year does Apple get sued? It's probably like 7 times a second or something. It's like how fast they sell iPhones. Like people love to sue companies with a lot of money. Those are the best people to sue because that's where the money is, right? It's just a small input into their system. I think the class action lawsuit is a slightly bigger signal to Apple than the online petition, which Apple, I'm sure, is used to entirely ignoring, but they're both signals. And so if Apple wants to know how annoyed people are about the keyboard, valid or invalid, they can look at those signals and find out. But yeah, it's not class action lawsuits. It's hard for me to get worked up about any of these things, but class action lawsuits in particular bother me by their nature for the reasons that Marco said, that like it promises like justice, but it feels bad to a lot of people that the justice accrues in a very small measure to everyone in the class. So great, you get a $12 check, right? But the 3 lawyers involved become multimillionaires, and it seems unfair. It's like one of those things where people are like, you did so little work and made so much money. You shot on a movie for 3 days and you made $20 million. That seems so unfair. But at least movie stars, you understand, like, well, people really want to see this person. But no one knows or cares who the lawyers are in a class action lawsuit. And the fact that they get so much money out of it disproportionately to the people who are part of the class, it just doesn't leave a good taste in a lot of people's mouths. But anyway, people just want to see Apple lose a lawsuit, or they want to get their $12 check and feel there's justice involved. And finally, on this topic, as I think Marco pointed out in a tweet, and many people have pointed out, like, we all kind of know how this is going to go down. Like, unless something dramatic happens, unless like some Apple employee comes out and is like a whistleblower and says, yes, Apple knew they were defective, unless something very dramatic happens, it's going to happen the way we always knew it was going to happen, and that Apple will probably do something in their future laptops to have a different keyboard. Hopefully it'll be better, but they'll do something different, right? Just like they did something different with the antennas on their phones eventually. And like many other hardware issues they've had, they'll probably do a repair extension program for these things, and it may or may not be a good repair extension that may or may not leave a big like gap in the poor suckers who bought them at the wrong time and will never be covered. And they'll move on with, they'll live and learn, right? So I don't think even if this class action lawsuit was wildly successful, they're not going to say refunds for everybody who bought a MacBook Pro with this keyboard, or you can trade it in for a new computer or whatever. Like, we know how this is going to turn out with or without the class action lawsuit. So we're all just kind of like waiting out the reliability of issues of this keyboard and hoping that the next one is better.
Yeah, and the sad thing is, like I've wanted, for a while now, I've wanted to like start a campaign, like to announce to people on a regular basis, here on Twitter, like all Apple knows about officially, all that's hitting them like where it counts, which is their data and their wallet, is when they're brought in for warranty repair, when Apple has to foot the bill for replacing an entire top case for one dead key. So I've been wanting for a while to encourage people, if you have one that has like a bad key, bring it in and make them replace it, and so that way, like, you are counted, because there's a whole lot of people out there who have brought them in, who have been getting them replaced. There's also a whole lot of people out there who have flaky keys and just don't bring them in because it's a huge pain. And the reason I haven't encouraged people to do that, and the reason I keep like convincing myself to not announce this everywhere, is because I know in reality I wouldn't bring it in if that was my only laptop or my main laptop, because it is a pain. It's so disruptive to bring in your computer to Apple, give them a stupid account with a stupid password so they can log in and do whatever they need and look at all your data. You should never, ever, ever have to give your password to anybody in this day and age. I don't know why they still insist on that, but okay. It's a pain to be without your computer. The reason, like, if you're buying a $1,500 plus laptop, chances are you need it for something in your life, and chances are you need it regularly. And especially if it's your only computer, it's quite an intrusion to go without it. I mean, look at how long I tolerated my terrible image retention on my last iMac because I didn't want to go without my main computer for a week, which is almost what it took when I finally did do it in the last week of the warranty. And this is another reason why, like, when people say, like, when there is a flaw with an Apple product, and a lot of times the defenders of this product will say, well, just bring it in, get it serviced, just bring it in. And it's like, that's not actually a good answer. That's actually, like, because most Apple products that I have bought, I have never needed to bring in for service. Most products of any type that I have bought, I have never needed to bring in for service. Bringing things in for service is hugely invasive and costly to a lot of people in various ways. The fact that it can be fixed in service is not a great excuse. Like that. So anyway, I totally get why people would be hesitant to bring in their computers for service, especially if the first time they bring them in, they get the runaround from the genius on the other side after the pain in the ass of making the appointment, and then somebody eventually tells them, well, this is user damage because you caused the dust to get out of that keycap, like what happened to Stephen Hackett. I get so much why nobody wants to bring in their laptops. But honestly, if you can bring it in, if it's not a big pain for you, bring in any broken butterfly keyboard laptop that you have and make them service it under warranty. Because if you want this problem to actually be fixed, we need to hit them where it counts. They don't give two craps about 16,000 signatures on a petition. They don't give two craps about people like me complaining on Twitter. They do give a number of craps about their spreadsheet. And so, if you have one of these keyboards, again, if this is affecting you, if you can bring it in for service while it's under warranty and make them replace it, please do. However, if that's a huge imposition on you, I totally understand. I'm not like saying you have to do it, but if you can do it, do it.
We could do the old people thing. I'm thinking of the people who, and this will start happening more and more, I assume, who go in with a broken key and their thing is out of warranty, and they find out to fix their broken key it's $400. Now they have to pay out of pocket. You may or may not be able to yell and scream and make Apple, give you a better deal or do it under warranty. This is assuming there's no warranty extension program by now. But one thing you can do, regardless of whether you choose to have the repair, is go back home and write a long, sad letter to Apple to say,
Dear Tim.
Dear Apple, I've used your products for years and blah, 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 blah. And then I went in and one key broke, and it's disappointing enough that the key broke. But then when I learned to fix the keyboard, they have to replace the whole top of the computer. It's going to cost me $400. This computer is only a year old or whatever, like one of those letters. And I mean like an actual physical letter, but it even could be an email. Taking the time, and this is a good outlet for your anger too, with like the company, regardless of whether you actually paid it. Say you can say you didn't pay it, or you can say you did pay it and it was a big hardship and you're really disappointed and you're never going to buy Apple products again or whatever. But kind of like say with political campaigns, that a bunch of automated signatures is weighed less than a real signature, is weighed less than a real handwritten letter. Like the sort of hierarchy of how much time did the person who sent this to me spend on it, and how does that represent how passionately they feel about it, and how many more people do I multiply this by to know that for every one handwritten letter we get, there's 10 people behind the scenes who couldn't be bothered to write a letter. Right? I remember my mother doing the same thing when I got my Mac SE30, and speaking of young hearing, I think I've told the story before, the power supply made a high-pitched whine that only I could hear because I was 12 and had really good hearing. And the adults at the repair center, this was before Apple stores, the adults at the repair center said, this thing isn't making any noise. And I felt like I was being gaslighted. And I was like, but it's making this terrible high-pitched screaming noise. How can you not hear it? And we went back and forth. And the repair center said they did something and gave it back. And it was just as bad or worse. And, and so it was like, it was all under warranty. So we weren't paying any money for it. But it went back and forth to the authorized Apple reseller, as they were known in those days, and still are, I assume. Back and forth lots of times. And eventually, my mother wrote a handwritten letter to Apple saying, we've used your computers for years. My son is really into your computers. We've been trying to get this repaired, and we haven't had any success. And they're kind of giving us the runaround and blah, blah, blah. Eventually, we ended up finding a different repair center that did replace the power supply with a new one that didn't make the noise. But that type of letter, I imagine, goes a lot farther than a signature or participation in a class action lawsuit or anything like that. Obviously, Marco's right. The thing that goes the farthest is making Apple pay their own money out of pocket for the repair, because that really hits them where it hurts. But if you can't do that, like for instance, you're out of warranty and Apple's not going to pay for it, and neither are you, because honestly, I would have serious doubts about paying $500 to repair a key on an out of warranty laptop that's probably going to have that same key go bad on the new keyboard, because the new keyboard is the same as the old keyboard. I would really think twice about that. Write an angry, long letter. You can be polite. You could say, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. However you want to do it. I think they will wait. I think they will weight that a lot more than you clicking on that online petition.
We are sponsored this week by Betterment. Rethink what your money can do. Visit betterment.com/ATP for more information. Betterment is the largest independent online financial advisor designed to help improve customers' long-term returns and lower your taxes for retirement planning, building wealth, and your other financial goals. Betterment takes advanced investment strategies and uses technology to deliver them to more than 300,000 customers. And all of this is with low fees. At Betterment, hidden costs and high fees are nowhere to be found. No matter who you are or how much money you invest, you get everything for one low, transparent management fee. And as a fiduciary, they make recommendations that are in their clients' best interests. They are not incentivized to recommend certain funds, and they don't have their own investment products to sell you. And Betterment also offers personalized advice and a suite of easy-to-use, nicely designed tools to help you know whether you're on track to hit your investing goals or get the retirement that you want. And when you need help and when you need assistance, their tools and their guidance can help get you on track. And Betterment brings you all this with incredibly low fees. There's only a 0.25% annual fee that includes unlimited messaging access to their team of licensed financial experts. If you have a more complex situation, Betterment Premium gives you unlimited phone call access to their team of certified financial planners for only 0.4% annually. Investing involves risk. Listeners can get up to 1 year managed free. For more information, visit betterment.com/ATP. That's betterment.com/ATP. Betterment. Rethink what your money can do.
I don't know anything about the Surface Hub 2 other than that the brief thing I read made it seem like a smartboard to me. So what's this about, and can somebody fill in as chief summarizer in chief?
John?
Did you even look at this, Marco?
Yeah, I tweeted about it. Everyone got mad at me.
Oh, all right. Anyway.
Wait, what was your tweet? Why did everyone get mad?
I basically said, I was kind of, snarkily saying that, Apple and Apple's defenders have basically been advancing the argument, seemingly, either by words in the case of the outsiders or by inaction in the case of Apple, that the Mac is kind of done and complete, and there's nowhere else for the Mac to go. Might as well it's kind of in maintenance mode, and we can occasionally make good new hardware to make more money, but we don't really need to advance the OS meaningfully in any significant direction. And then Microsoft comes into crazy stuff like this. Like Microsoft has the entire Surface line has been very ambitious hardware and software directions, ambitious new takes on what a computer can and should be, what it can do, blurring the lines between computers and tablets and things like that. Microsoft is doing tons of crazy experimentation, and yeah, most of it is weird, and most of it doesn't go anywhere. And people also try to argue, like, well, look at their sales numbers; they don't sell very many. Look, I don't give two craps about anyone's sales numbers. That when I'm discussing what's a good product and what isn't. So there's lots of resistance to me saying stuff like this. But basically, I think I applaud Microsoft for trying things like this, because there's this perception in our community that the PC, and by that I also include the Mac in the category of things that are PC and PC-like, there's this perception that the PC is just dead, or it's the past, or it's done, it's complete. And that's just so short-sighted and ignorant. We in technology always want things that come along that are new to, quote, kill the old things, and the old things are dead. And in reality, that hardly ever happens. In reality, most technology that comes out is additive to what came before it. Like when, phones came out, we didn't all just move everything we did to phones. We use phones a lot, but we also still use computers. And, when tablets came out, tablets didn't kill phones. We just used tablets and phones and computers. And now we have smartwatches and smart cylinders. When the smartwatch was first, kind of in its early rumblings, everyone's like, oh, this is going to kill the phone. Everything's going to move to your wrist. Guess what? It hasn't, and there's no sign of that happening anytime soon. And so, guess what? We use smartwatches and phones and tablets and computers and cylinders. Now we're talking about AR. AR is going to replace everything with all this magic hardware that doesn't exist yet, but it's going to replace everything with all these killer apps we can't think of. It's going to replace your phone, and it's going to replace your computer. You're going to be just standing there sitting in front of a blank wall in your cubicle and moving things through the air. And that might happen, but what's more likely to happen is that it's going to come out and we're going to buy AR glasses and watches and cylinders and tablets and phones and PCs. So anyway, all of this is a long way of saying that I think that the world of PCs and Macs has gone through a period over the last 5 to 10 years of creative rethinking by Microsoft and negligent underinvestment by Apple. And that makes me sad, because I don't want to use Windows. I don't want to use PCs. I still want to keep using Macs and Mac OS. It does seem like maybe this is turning around on the hardware side recently. Not so much on the software side, unfortunately, but maybe on the hardware side, we're getting some movement here. The iMac Pro is excellent. The Mac Pro is coming, but the laptops are kind of a mess. The Touch Bar seemed like their one experiment in this area, and it wasn't very good, and it hasn't gone anywhere since it launched 2 years ago. So basically, my position on the Surface, whatever this is called, the Surface Smartboard, is this is a thing I'm never going to see in real life. It's a thing I'm never going to use. It's a thing that very few people will ever see or use in real life. However, got to give Microsoft credit. They are trying to advance the PC in a way that seemingly no one else is. So even though it's crazy, and even though it's probably not going to go anywhere, and even though their sales numbers are nothing to pay attention to, still, they are trying to move the PC forward. And the reality is, most of us still use PCs to do most of our work most of the time. So it benefits all of society that someone is trying to move these things forward. And unfortunately, Apple's not really, they're not doing enough. If they whatever they are trying, it isn't enough. So I'm glad someone is. I wish everyone was, but ultimately, the PC and PC-like things are a part of our life. They are still a part of our life. They will be a part of our life for the foreseeable future. And good job, Microsoft, for trying to advance them.
Yeah, when I look at this, I knew what your take would be, and we've all talked about this before about how Microsoft's trying all sorts of interesting things. I think we talked about the goddamn Surface Book Pro, Surface Studio. I cannot remember their damn names.
The Studio is the iMac thing with the knob. The Book Pro is the detachable laptop tablet thing, I think. Which one's the MacBook Air with the carpet keyboard?
I have no idea. I see it in the picture here. I just don't know what it's called.
That's just a Surface, isn't it?
I have no idea.
I don't know.
Is it the Surface Air? Maybe I don't know. Is that a thing?
But like with all these things, like to varying degrees, sometimes like the one that looks like a big iMac, it's like that's the thing that Apple I would have liked to have seen from Apple. But for this particular one, and for people who know what we're talking about, it's called the we'll put the link. It's called the
Surface Hub 2.
Surface Hub 2, which means there was a Surface Hub 1 that I've probably already forgotten about if I knew about it at all.
Well, do you remember what the original Surface was?
Yeah, the big table thing. I know.
Yep.
I remember that. So these things are very big, like the size of a television set, oriented vertically in most of the things I see, although they do rotate. Like a big TV, like a, I don't know, 40-something inch TV. I don't know how big they are.
It looks like a 42-inch TV rotated into portrait orientation.
Right. And on it is running some variant of Windows, like everything else that Microsoft does. And it's a touchscreen. And it has a camera on it. I assume that's what that thing is. It looks like the old Apple iSight. It's like a cylinder. It's like you couldn't build that into the display. Anyway. And use it as a touchscreen. And you can gang together multiple ones. They have one where you can connect all four of them and show an image across all four. And they always show it all sort of in the wall of an office where you can project from your little laptop-y thing onto the big screen, and people can walk up to the screen and scroll and point to things and manipulate it on the screen with your two hands. And it's really big. Like, it's not, the resolution is, it's only like a 4K TV. So it's not, if you get close to it, I'm sure you can see big chunky pixels and stuff. But it's more of like a large display type device. And unlike the thing that looks like an iMac, when I see something like this, I think it's not so much showing that they're trying new things in the PC space. It's more like they're trying new things in the tablet space. So if Apple was going to do something like this, like not just Apple, I think the appropriate software for this kind of hardware is more like iOS, in that you want something like this to behave like an appliance. And you want it to have the less complicated, more reliable, more sort of, less flexible, but more appliance-like operating system. And in Apple's ecosystem, that's iOS. No one wants to see a big setup of these displays with some weird Windows Update message popped up in the corner, which I see all the time, or worse yet, a blue screen. But, just sort of the sort of Windows desktop PC nags about things that you have to do, right? And I suppose that dialogue can come up on iOS as well. But, like, this should be a really big iPad. We saw that with Panic Software, their great status board application that they eventually gave up on after some struggles with Apple. They had a big television set showing the output of an iOS device showing status board. And this wasn't even a touch screen. It wasn't for input. It was purely an output device, just to have a big screen in their office showing them cool graphs of information that's relevant to the company that they updated from an iOS app that they wrote using a clever API, right? That looks like a lot what this is without the touching. This is adding the input aspect. If I wanted to have a gigantic iPad that I could swipe around on to show people things, and you could gang together multiple ones of them, that's this. And I don't know if it's a great idea. Maybe it's a terrible idea. Maybe no one will buy them or whatever. But this is a case where Apple is actually better positioned than Microsoft to field a product like this if it turns out that people want a product like this. Now, in this particular case, I'm going to guess that there's not a lot of market for this, even if it is great at fulfilling its need, and every company in the United States has this. There are far fewer companies than there are people, and so this would be, sort of an enterprise type sale, which is Microsoft's bread and butter these days. So maybe it is a product that'll work for them. But it's not just about Apple's not being daring enough by trying things with the Mac. Apple's not being daring enough by trying things with the iPad either. I think they're probably being appropriately daring with the iPhone, but for both the iPad and the Mac seems not to be advancing just because they're like, it's less prioritized and they're too cautious. But then the iPad, as many, many people have pointed out over many, many years, that's not advancing either. And that's supposed to be the platform Apple cares about, like the OS platform that Apple cares about. Obviously, it's not the hardware form factor that Apple cares about as much, but it's the same OS as the phone. And so it feels like a shame that Apple isn't making it took them so long to make a bigger iPad, and I still think they should make an even bigger one. Here's a huge iPad. And no, you don't carry a 40-inch iPad around. It's ridiculous. But it's mounted on the wall, and it can run iOS, and you can do lots of cool things with it. And then Panic can bring back Status Board, and everything would be good.
I don't know, man. I simultaneously can't get too excited about this because, as one of you just said, I don't think I'll ever see it in my entire life. But I also respect, like Marco was saying, that at least Microsoft's throwing something at the wall and seeing if it sticks, which is weird because I think the line that an Apple fan should toe is, oh, they should just have an opinion and figure it out once and for all and go with it and not throw a bunch of stuff against the wall. But I think we're so thirsty for Apple to do anything. And I mean, the Touch Bar wasn't that long ago, but it was not that exciting to most of us. And I mean, sir, I don't even have one yet. I've never owned a computer with a Touch Bar, even 2 years on or whatever it is.
You're not missing much.
Yeah, I know. And so I think we're all just thirsty for something interesting. And I think, John, you were right in saying that they are doing interesting things on the phone. I guess maybe they're doing interesting things on the iPad, but again, that doesn't personally affect me.
But they're not. Like on the iPad, they've been so cautious. There have been so few features that are even iPad specific. Forget about what the features do. Just how many features are unique to the iPad. There are not that many of them as compared to the phone. So it just gets like phone leftovers plus a little bit of iPad stuff. And what you could do, what you can do with a much bigger, more complicated iPad, what you could do with multitasking that was more capable and flexible and configurable than the current split screen stuff, which itself is a huge leap over like not having anything before or like having very primitive multitasking to make these devices more capable. And we used to talk about them becoming capable enough to replace your Mac, but at this point I'm saying just forget about that as a goal for now and just say they're so powerful hardware wise, it's like that power is being squandered to make a truly pro iPad. And yeah, maybe make something that you can stick on a wall. Who knows? But like, they're not really. Change in the iPad world is slow. How many years did it exist before we got the bigger ones? And the bigger ones weren't that much bigger. How many years did it exist before we got an Apple supported stylus? And even then, it hasn't changed much since then. So, I think there's plenty of room for hardware and software innovation in the iPad realm. It's just happening very slowly.
All right, so that actually kind of segues relatively nicely to askatp for this week. So Ish Abaz writes, what would you say Apple's focus is at the moment? And naturally, Apple's a big company, and it focuses on many, many, many different things. And so I will even extend this to say, what is their focus and or what should their focus be? And I will start us off by saying, I think their focus is pretty heavily on iOS and specifically the iPhone. I don't think that's a particularly revolutionary point of view to have. And similarly, unrevolutionary, their focus really, I want their focus to be actually possibly more than anything else on Siri. Because now that I have a competing cylinder in the house and a competing, person in a tube in the house, it's becoming ever more obvious to me how much I really dislike Siri and don't trust it for anything. And I kind of hope they're focusing on that. And we'll see if they really are. Marco, what's your thoughts?
First of all, credit to Asker Ish Shabazz. He's a really cool indie iOS developer, and you should look at his stuff. Anyway.
Also true.
In broad strokes, I basically have two answers to this. Number one, I think you should listen to last week's episode of The Talk Show with John Gruber. He and Ben Thompson got into a very interesting discussion about basically where Apple's growth in their revenue is really in services. And if you look at how that services thing breaks down, number one is the App Store revenue, like their 30% cut. And then, and then number two is iCloud storage. And so you look at things like, are they likely to lower the cut to app developers? Nope. Are they likely to make better deals on iCloud storage or increase the free tier? Nope. And there was an interesting discussion about how, Apple in the past was all about selling you new hardware, which the interests of what's best for Apple aligned well with what's best for the customers. But as they get into more services revenue, those interests start to diverge. And it's a very interesting problem to have, probably not a good problem to have, where in order to make more from services, you have to start doing a little more user hostile stuff, or like taxing your users in more and more ways. And I think that's going to conflict with what's best for the user more often than not. But anyway, I think I can summarize this in part, what their priority is versus what their priority should be. I think Apple used to be a software company that was funded by the sales of their hardware. And I think today's Apple is a hardware company that just uses software to provide basic support for their hardware. And I don't think Apple's leadership sees the difference between those two things. But there's a pretty big difference. There's a huge difference between those two things. To sell good products, good computing products, the software is really what sells them. For almost all these things, like the software is what matters here. The hardware is nice, and it's great to have nice hardware, and good for Apple for continuing to make nice hardware most of the time. But it seems like the software is really stretched thin. Ultimately, it seems like Tim Cook's solution to a lot of problems is just make a new hardware platform, and then just throw some software on there that you might maintain. Maybe throw another app store on there to get more app store revenue. But like, how's Apple TV doing? How's the HomePod doing? How's the iPad software doing? Like, you just mentioned, like they kind of can't keep up with it very well. How's the Watch doing? How's Watch OS doing? How's the iMessage store doing? Like, there's lots of app stores that keep being launched, lots of new software platforms that have launched over the last 5 years or so, and it just seems like Apple has neither the resources nor seemingly the interest to maintain them and to bring them forward and to maintain quality levels on the software side. All they want to do is sell us more and more hardware. Here, have a dongle factory laptop. This laptop exists purely to sell dongles. Like, your solution here, have a HomePod. Here's an expensive home speaker that we're gonna put minimal effort in the software into and make it barely function with the assistant. Like, I think that's a huge divide between philosophies, and ultimately, I don't think Tim Cook understands software at all, and I question how much Johnny does. And so, the company's going to keep being run this way for a while. Ultimately, Steve was a software person who used hardware to make that happen. And I miss that.
I hate any analysis of Apple that includes it being described as either a software company or a hardware company. So I will set aside that. But setting aside that whole part, and where Marco went into his usual downward spiral into being sad about Apple, I agree. I agree with the short version of the answer, which is where is Apple's focus at this moment? iPhone and services. That's where it is. Where should Apple's focus be? Probably iPhone and services, and in particular the services that have to do with voice assistants, as Casey pointed out. So I think Apple's focus is more or less in the appropriate place, and there are some tweaks here and there, but that's where it is. And all that stuff that Apple that Marco listed that as is Apple's version of let's see what sticks. Maybe people want to buy iMessage apps. Let's try that or whatever. It's like that's not where their focus is, though. They do that. That is a pattern that they've done, and it's disappointing to us who want things to be either well supported or not to exist. But that's not where their focus is. Like, that's clearly not where their focus. If they were focusing there, they'd be constantly improving it or ditching it.
I mean, I could just answer it with one word. What's their focus? Margins. That is their entire focus. Margins. Like, talk about what does Tim Cook care about? Margins.
I don't think that actually is I don't think the focus is margins. And to do the nicer explanation of Apple being a software company, or hardware company, I think if you asked Apple, in Apple's best version of itself, speaking as an institution or any individual person who's supposed to be an avatar for the institution, they would say that they're trying to sell you products, that it's the whole package. The whole point of Apple is it's the whole package. They make the whole thing, and it's supposed to solve a problem for you. It's supposed to provide an experience, and lots of their products have been like that. The iPod is a great example. Portable music playing. Is it a hardware product? Is it a software product? At various times you could say, oh, the software, no one cares about it. It was all about the hardware. Oh, maybe the hardware doesn't matter. It's all about the software once you get to the iPhone or whatever. But they're selling you products or solutions, or there is a benefit that comes as a unit, and then we break it down into pieces and see how each part is being maintained and what they're emphasizing and where they're able to innovate and how software affects the quality of the product, and with the keyboard, how hardware affects your experience of the product and all that other stuff. But I'm not particularly cynical or pessimistic about where Apple's heart is. I think it comes down to implementation. Are they achieving their stated and I believe real goal to provide good products that people like? Where can they improve that? But focus is slightly different. I think what this question is getting at, but a lot of people are talking about is like where, we often complain about areas where Apple's focus doesn't exist, and we very frequently acknowledge that Apple shouldn't be focused on the Mac more than the iPhone. That would be the wrong thing to do. Like, every aspect, not just how much money it makes, but in the end, how important the product is. The iPhone is a more important product, not just a more important product to Apple, but a more important product, period, than the Mac. It just is, right? And so if that's where the company's focus is, it's in the right place. And as we always say, they're doing pretty good with the phones for the most part, right? So I think this question leads me to say that despite all of our complaining, Apple's focused in the right place, more or less.
All right. Owl City writes, yes, seriously, do you think the new Mac Pro will have only USB-C ports? I'm not so sure. I do think any new MacBook Pro absolutely will have only USB-C ports, no matter how much any of us, Marco, wish it didn't. But the new Mac Pro, given that the iMac Pro came with some old USB ports, I think there's a pretty solid chance there'll be at least one or two. What is it, USB-A or B? I always get it wrong. A?
A.
It doesn't really matter anyway. But USB-A ports, I think there'll be a couple on there, but I think it'll be very heavy on USB-C, unless obviously they go ARM, in which all bets are off. But I don't think that's going to happen. John, what do you think?
Can you clarify? Did you ever get a clarification of what this question actually means? Because I think there'll be a power plug on it.
Well,
I mean, like, what does
come
this
on,
mean?
man, come on.
Well, we don't have them on the MacBook. You'll just have power over USB PD.
Yeah, but I'm saying the Mac Pro will have a power plug. It won't be powered by USB-C. I'm going to come out on a limb and say that. Yeah, they just mean, like, will it have any USB port that is not a C? Is that your interpretation of this question?
Yes, correct.
You can plug in any of the 6 USB-C ports into the power adapter.
Yeah, I think there is a reasonable chance that it will have USB-A. And the iMac Pro is that was my question. I forget if I actually suggested it to somebody, maybe to Gruber before he did his interview or whatever, but the question would have been, why does the iMac Pro have USB-A ports? Like, if you're going to get Phil Schiller, Craig Federighi or whatever, or Johnny Ive or anybody involved with the creation of this product, since you have to be so careful about how you ask things to Apple to get any reasonable answer, the simple question would be, why does the iMac Pro have USB-A ports? And it's a trap. The question is a trap, because the idea is they'll give you some explanation, and the follow-up is, how does that explanation not apply to insert product that you're angry about not having USB-A ports on, right? Like, that's how that goes. But the answer, I think, is why does it have USB-A ports, is because there's room for them and some of our customers want them. And so I'd say, okay, so is there not room for them on your laptops, or do people not want them on your laptops, right? And anyway, that's how that goes. But I think that is the answer. The answer is that there's room on the iMac Pro, and some people want them. And they're cheap. That's another thing. And so they put them there. And I really hope on the iMac Pro there will be room for them, because the iMac Pro should not be the size of a softball.
On the Mac Pro, you mean?
Yeah, the Mac Pro. There'll be room for them because it'll be big. I think people do want them. This is convenient. Like, you got all this space in the back of this damn computer. You can't throw some A ports. It's just easier not to have an adapter. And they're cheap. So I would give it a 50-50 odds that the Mac Pro has USB-A ports on it.
Yeah, I would give it almost 100% odds. I mean, because the iMac Pro has them. By the way, and I agree with you, Casey, that I think, likelihood of MacBook Pros being released that ever have USB-A ports are pretty much zero. I think best we can hope for on new MacBook Pros is maybe the return of the SD slot. That's and that's the best we can hope for like the return or addition of old ports. So I would not be, I wouldn't be hoping for anything more than that. On the laptops, you can make a reasonable argument that you really can't fit most of the legacy ports, including USB-A, with the current thickness of those cases. Like, it just doesn't fit. The whole reason that we can have it on the desktop so easily is because, Apple has made this very expensive decision to tie Thunderbolt 3 into USB-C and to have all of their USB-C ports, except the one on the 12-inch MacBook, be Thunderbolt 3 ports. So therefore, the number of USB-C ports on any of their computers is limited by the amount of Thunderbolt ports that the chipset can support bandwidth-wise and controller-wise. So that's why, you have 4 on most of the, high-end products, you have 2 on the lower-end ones, and you have 0 on the 12-inch MacBook because that chipset doesn't actually support Thunderbolt. So on the iMac Pro, they have these 2 wonderful Thunderbolt 3 controllers that supply tons of bandwidth to those USB-C ports, but that's kind of a waste if you're using your USB ports mostly to plug in like keyboards and mice and charging cables and stuff like that. I think it does totally make sense if you have the physical space to include regular old USB-A ports that are not Thunderbolt 3 ports. Now, they could make USB-C ports that aren't Thunderbolt 3 ports. They do in the MacBook, but they could decide all right, the rightmost 4 of them have Thunderbolt, and the leftmost 4 of them are just USB over USB-C. But I think they probably don't want that kind of port confusion. So that's why they restricted Thunderbolt 3 they restricted USB-C to only be Thunderbolt 3 on most of their products. But again, I think that was a bad choice, especially since most of the time on the laptops, one of those is being used for power. At least one of the other ones is probably being used for some kind of low-speed USB device, or charging a phone or something like that. But anyway, on the desktops, they have the space. They already have USB built into the chipset that Intel supplies them. So all they have to do is put the ports on the outside and run a cable to the chipset, and they have ports. So it's kind of, you basically get them for free. So you might as well.
Adam Rourke writes, with manual transmissions on the decline and fewer people eager to own them, could you see the option flipping from its place in history as the starting point for the cheap car to becoming a premium one for the upper-end niche market? How much would you pay? So to build on this a little bit, when we were growing up, even the youngins, Marco and myself of the show, it used to be that if you didn't want to pay a whole pile of money for a car, you would get a manual transmission because it was between $500 and $3,000 cheaper in order to do so. But now it seems like nobody wants a stick, and it's becoming kind of passé or just antiquated to have one. So would you pay additional money for a 3-pedal car? I would. I absolutely would. And I do think it is very quickly becoming either extinct or, as Adam said, a niche thing. I would absolutely pay $1 to $2 to $3 to $4 to maybe even more thousands of dollars for a car that I wanted to have a 3-pedal option. But the more I think about it, the more I think my very next car, especially if I don't buy it soon, which I do not intend to buy a car soon, although we might talk about that in the after show, my next car may not be a 6-speed. It very well may be my next one. Ugh. And that's in part because I've had terrible thoughts about Alfa Romeos, but that's a different issue. So yeah, I don't know. I would pay many, many, many dollars in order for this to be a possibility, but unfortunately it's not quite so simple. Marco, you, I presume, don't give a crap anymore.
That's true. I don't give a crap anymore, but I do think it's an interesting question. And standard disclaimer applies here. This is for the U.S. Things are very different elsewhere, where manual transmission cars elsewhere have had a much longer and more widespread lifespan than they have in the U.S. But yeah, basically in the U.S. right now, the only way you can get a manual is on a few very low-end cars and sports cars. And even the sports cars, it's getting increasingly rare. The question is interesting because it's kind of happening already. Right now, if you want a manual transmission, except for the very few cases where you can get them in lower-end cars, you kind of do have to pay extra in the sense that you have to get a high-end sports car to even have it as an option. I have paid extra to get a higher-end model to get a transmission I like in the car I wanted. Now I don't have one anymore, but I'll tell you one thing's for sure. I'm not going to go back to an automatic, no matter what. That is an option I won't take.
John, you're so cheap you wouldn't pay any extra, would you?
No. Well, so the problem with this scenario is could you see them flipping and stopping being as part of a cheap car and becoming a premium? The problem is that there is a very narrow window between the time when it's not a cheap car thing anymore and the time when it disappears completely, right? There's the tiny sliver of where we don't put this on the cheap cars. They all get automatics. And most people don't want it even on the high-end cars, but there is some small subset of people that are willing to pay a premium to get the stick. And that window, we're currently in that window right now, and I don't even know if it's a premium. Maybe it's just like a same price or a no-cost option. I think, was it the M5? It was a no-cost option last time?
Yeah.
Most BMWs. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This is it. And it's going to disappear. It's never going to be the case where it's available as a $5,000 option to $10,000 option on a narrow range of high-end cars. That will never be the case. Like, all of the high-end cars now are giving up their manuals as even options. Like, that's what's happening. First, it became a no-cost option, and then they're just like, how many cars can we remove the stick from? There are very few holdouts, and it's leaving more and more cars. The new M5, no stick option, right? We all knew that was going to happen, right? A lot of Porsches are getting rid of the sticks, even though they're able to sell more of them probably than any other car maker just because of their place in the market. So, no, it's not going to be like, there are many things that will end up being premiums on high-end cars for a small number of people, but the stick will have a very brief moment in that slot, and then it will just disappear entirely. That's my prediction.
Yep, I agree, and it makes me sad.
The only place it will live on is in, and it's not like a premium, it will live on in like kit cars. People who have kit cars and, sort of outside the mainstream of regular cars, where you're like, I don't buy, cars from dealers. I build them myself or do aftermarket modifications and stuff like that. That's where the sticks will live on, because forever people will want to, like the same reason people like build and drive replica Model Ts. Like, stick shift will never die in that realm. It will always be a historical thing that people are interested in. Even people who are alive today, like they never drove a real Model T, but they're interested in it because they're interested in history. And then the whole class of people who they're interested in cars because they were the cool cars when they were kids. That will never die, and sticks will always live there. And that entire realm is premium in that everything there costs $1 bazillion, and it really has no reflection on like cars that regular people buy. But setting that aside, just for when you go to your BMW dealer for a brief time, you can get sticks as no cost option. Maybe there'll be a tiny window where you can pay extra for them, and then you just won't be able to get a stick on a BMW. That's what'll happen.
Sigh. I know you're right, but sigh.
Thanks to our sponsors this week, Betterment, Squarespace, and Aftershokz, and we will talk to you next week.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
Oh wait, John, you never answered. How much would you pay?
Oh, I would probably pay like $1,000 or $2,000. I mean, the proportion wise, if I'm buying a $25,000 car, obviously the absolute amounts are not that much, but I would pay a premium for it.
Well, it's. I mean, this will get into what we're talking about in a second, but like, it just so totally changes the experience of driving a car.
It's worse on low end cars because the automatics and the, God forbid, CVTs are so much worse than the fancy car. Transmissions of the same kind, so much more hunting for gears, so much more weird droning and just like laggy reactions to everything you do. I'm reminded of every time I have to drive around in a rental Accord, even if it's the same model as mine. I'm like, oh God, this car, suddenly I hate this car. This car that I like and use, you change the transmission and it becomes something that I don't want to be in.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's a very, very big difference in having the exact same car otherwise, whether it's manual or automatic. It's a totally different driving experience. So Casey, what's going on with your car stuff?
Yeah, so let's start with Casey's car corner. I got in my car, what was this, Monday, I think it was, maybe it was Monday, after work, and it was something like 90 or 95 degrees out, and I very much wanted to turn the air conditioning on, so I did. and nothing happened. The screen, the little HVAC controls or whatever you call them, the air conditioning screen showed that the air conditioning was on maximum. It showed the fans were blowing as hard as they could possibly blow, and no air was moving. The fans were not on. And I drove home like that. Luckily, I had functioning windows. Luckily, I don't live that far from the office, but it was a bit toasty.
I mean, you could almost take a running leap out of your office door and land in your house.
That is true. But nevertheless, it was a warm 5-minute drive. And when I got home, I parked the car in the garage, turned it off, waited about 15 seconds, turned it back on. Everything worked great. And so far, it has continued to work great since that fateful Monday or whatever day it was. But yeah, just a new little thing for me to stress out about on my car. Wonderful.
I remember when my air conditioning compressor went bad on my Civic and we weren't ready to buy a new car yet, so I just drove it for like a year and a half with no AC.
No, absolutely not.
It was rough.
No. And now, granted, you live in, an Arctic hellscape, so you could probably get away with it there. But down here where we actually have summer.
Summer is very hot and humid up here as well.
Oh, no. You don't get to friggin' tell me that I don't have winter and then say, oh, but I have summer.
It is. It's not. Here's the thing. It's not like you live in Arizona where it's 125. Your hot weather is just like our hot weather. There's just slightly more of it.
It's exactly the same with winter. You get slightly more winter.
No, most of your year is tepid. Most of your year is tepid and crappy. For the super hot part, go look at the weather charts. Your average temperature may be a little bit higher, but humidity, which you have too, that's what does it. When it's 93 and humid and you have a 95 and humid, that's the same weather. It's not like you're 125.
I'm so angry at you right now. But
also, my drives back to and from work are much longer than yours.
Anyway, I just wanted to share that there are still continuing issues with my BMW, and somebody needs to donate me a Giulia Quadrifoglio. Please and thank you.
Here's the thing. Somebody could donate you exactly the price of it, and you wouldn't buy it. You still wouldn't buy it.
Yeah, probably not. I don't know.
See?
I don't know, man.
and the AC might break on that after a year or two.
That's also true. I did see one in town, and it was a blue one, which is what I keep telling myself my next car will be blue. And this particular blue I did not care for. I think if I were to get a Quadrifoglio, it would have to be the red of the one that I tested. But that being said...
How does it look in white?
Mostly not good.
We have some white ones tooling around here, and I continue to think it looks gross in any color.
It's not gross in any color. Your eyes are as broken as your ears, Mr. Syracuse.
No. Someone around here has an i8, by the way. I see it all the time now. Someone must have just gotten it. And I don't think it could. Are they still selling i8s new?
I think so.
I think so, yeah.
Anyway, that's an awful car, but it looks really cool.
Anyway, I've seen this Quadrifoglio around town, and I kind of want it. But
and speaking of cars you've seen around town, today I saw my first Maserati SUV.
They make an SUV?
Of course they do. Everyone has to.
Is it as boring and expensive as their cars?
I'm sure it'll be their best-selling model if it isn't already.
Yeah, probably. So Casey, so you want to buy the Quadrifoglio after all?
Well done. I do and I don't. Like, the problem is it's an $80,000 car, and I absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, do not want to spend $80,000.
So Casey, you want to lease the Quadrifoglio after all?
Well, but that's equivalent money. You just spread out. But
no, that's not how leases work.
Oh, whatever. It's you know what I mean. You're
I'm not sure I do.
But okay, so let me finish my thought. What I'm driving at, though, is I've been thinking a lot about getting what would the price of a Quadrifoglio be after a lease? So this is a 2 or 3 year old car. From my understanding, they're having a hard time moving any of them, but I would assume the Quadrifoglio would be even worse since it's an $80,000 car. And since it doesn't have a good transmission, I don't have a clutch to worry about, and tires are replaceable, and nobody wants to buy it Alfa Romeo because they presumably can't run for more than 10 minutes at a time. So could I steal one for like 20 or 30 or 40 grand, after it comes off lease?
No, first of all, no. So what do they run new, like 70, 80?
Yeah.
All right. Even a terrible car, it's going to have a lease residual of something like, 50% or something like that. So assume that the post-lease buyout price, best case, might be 40%. And that's best case. It's probably more than that. So what's 40% of it? It's, 40 grand or something like that, 30, 35, 40 grand. And that's,
40% of 80 is 32 grand.
And then that's really best case. That's unlikely. It's going to be more like 50 to 60%. And so you're looking at in the 40 to 50 range. Secondly, for God's sake, after buying a BMW and having problems servicing it, do not buy an Alpha and like a 3-year-old Alpha that someone else leased and drove really hard, probably, because why else would you buy one? Yeah, first of all, that's a terrible idea. And then finally, if they're having trouble moving them, you might be able to take advantage of the best deal in buying cars, which is lease specials. Lease specials are how auto manufacturers dump inventory of models that they want to move or to temporarily boost sales for a certain quarterly margin or something like that. So if they're actually not moving, which I wouldn't assume that the high-end sporty model is not moving just because the rest of the line isn't.
Right.
But if that isn't indeed the case, the deal to be had is going to be on a lease special, not on some kind of weird off-lease thing. And that also totally avoids the issue of your maintenance problem with buying unreliable, high-performance brand cars.
Yeah. I don't know. I shouldn't do it. I won't do it, but it's tempting. It is tempting.
Underscore my name is T in the chat says, at least wait until it gets to Beta Romeo.
That is a truly terrible joke that I approve of. The other thing I wanted to share in Casey's Car Corner is I went on a test drive as a passenger in a brand new Jeep Wrangler JL, which is like the equivalent of saying, an F30, if you will. And it was nice for a Jeep. I mean, it has all of the problems that Jeeps have. It's tall, it's slow, it's bumpy, it's not extraordinarily cushy inside. This one actually had manual windows. It was a brand new car sold in 2018 with manual windows. And the reason being, it actually makes sense. The reason being is because if you are the kind of person that would take the doors off, which I would be, and then it makes sense you would want as little weight in the doors as possible. So taking them off would be easier. And having all the weight of, a power window actuator or what have you and motor and all that, that is not insignificant. And additionally, it didn't have power door locks for the exact same reason. And I laughed about that. I think if I were to buy one, I would get power door locks. I would get power windows, etc. But I respect those who don't get them, especially if it's because they want to take the doors off. This particular one had the most. It wasn't a beater, but it wasn't stripped, but it was certainly not a high end model. It didn't have the very nice infotainment, so the infotainment was kind of garbage, and the interior bits were fine. They were not great. They were certainly not, of European quality, but they were fine. This particular one had the 6-cylinder, and it was decent from the passenger seat. But you know what? It was not bad. The one thing that I noticed that really bothered me, though, is that when Erin's car comes to a stop, her XC90, when it comes to a stop and turns itself off, do either of your cars do this, John? I forget.
Stop, start? No, thank God I have avoided that so far.
Well, it's actually, you get used to it. It's not terrible. But when Erin's car comes to a stop...
No, it is terrible. You can get used to it, but it is terrible.
I would disable it. I would consider not buying a car if I couldn't disable it.
Yeah.
Fair.
It's that bad.
I mean, we don't... well, so here's the thing. In the Volvo, in the warm weather, because we actually have summer here, unlike in Boston, what happens is the car will turn off and the air conditioning will still run for a solid couple of minutes. And then eventually when the car realizes, the air conditioning seems to be fading, it'll actually start itself back up, or perhaps not even turn itself off in the first place, in order to get the cabin to stay cool. Meanwhile, the Jeep, and this is one of those like small touches that is just indicative of the difference between American and European cars. The Jeep, 2 seconds after starting it, after it had been sitting out in the hot sun all day, we came to the first stoplight, it turned itself off, and the air conditioning conked out within like 10 seconds. Now, granted, there was a button right on the dash, a physical button, which was a nice touch, right on the dash in order to turn it off, but it was annoying, to say the least, that we got all of 5 seconds of air conditioning before it just gave up the ghost. And that was too bad. Additionally, when we took off, the soft top was actually not latched properly, which was kind of funny because we were driving on a surface street, so we're doing like 20, 30 miles an hour. And I'm like, man, this thing is loud. And remember, my dad has a JK Wrangler. He has had older Wranglers on and off my entire life. And so I know what a Wrangler is supposed to sound like, even with the soft top. And I was like, damn, this is loud. And then I look up and realize, there's a little bit of sun coming through right above the windshield. That might be why. And so we had to pull over and latch it. And then it was much, much, much better. But It wasn't bad inside. It really is a lot nicer than they have ever been before, which I know is a low bar, but they're pretty nice inside. I would definitely like to drive one.
You're really not selling it very well. Yeah, I took a ride in this Jeep the other day, and the interior sucked, the controls sucked, the air conditioning sucked, the auto stop sucked. It wasn't very comfortable. It was slow. It was boxy. It was bumpy. It was loud. The roof fell off. The doors are going to fall off. No power locks. No power windows. It was great.
That is one interpretation of the story I just told. That is not the way I intended it, but that is one valid interpretation thereof.